my pleasure to introduce Ms. Lisa Hadden. Ms. Hadden has extensive experience in the development of primary health care systems, community and economic development programs, and asset-based community development, ABCD, approaches to community building. She holds an undergraduate degree in secondary education with an emphasis in English and Spanish, and a master's degree in English composition and communications theory, both from Central Michigan University. After holding director positions with federally qualified health centers and nonprofit organizations, she left the executive suite at age 48 to work with a small nonprofit as a branch of a larger inner city hospital working on the streets of Saginaw, Michigan. For the next 10 years, she worked in partnership with city neighborhood residents in recreating their communities through ABCD approaches. During that time, Ms. Hadden was awarded a Creating Healthier Communities Fellowship from the Health Forum, an international leadership program affiliated with the American Hospital Association. Her project, entitled Community Defined Health, which is also trademarked, is recognized nationally for its innovative combination of asset-based community development with education of health professional students as a means to support local community building. 20 years ago, John McKnight, the director of the ABCD Institute, invited her to become an adjunct faculty of that institute at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Ms. Hadden has also served as an adjunct instructor for the College of Human Medicine, Department of Family Practice at Michigan State University, and also as an instructor in the College of Nursing at Saginaw Valley State University. She was also the director of AHEC, which is Area Health Education Center. She has published multiple articles detailing her work in Saginaw's neighborhoods. These include The Community as Co-Producer of Health in the Health Forum Journal and Community Defined Health, Thinking from the Inside Out in the Metropolitan Journal. In 2008, she was awarded the Saginaw Azanta Club Woman of the Year Award, and in 2015, she was awarded honorable mention from the Central Michigan University Woman of the Year Award for her work in the College of Medicine with medical students in utilizing ABCD approaches to community engagement and in rural clinical rotations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Lisa Hadden.
Thank you for wiring me up. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you today for coming to the colloquium. I'm so pleased so many people want to come and hear about community engagement. There's so many ways of looking at it and thinking about it and actually doing it and engaging with communities. It's just so great to see all of you who want to come and learn more. And I also am aware that many of you are already doing this in your programs and in your communities. So I want to thank you again for inviting me. I want to thank Dr. Burkhardt for inviting me. I have to tell you, this is a tenacious man. He tried to get me to come down here last fall, and I couldn't make it. And after I said I couldn't make it, he kept, okay, well, when can you make it? So I said, okay, I'll come in January. So I have to thank you for doing that, for this wonderful opportunity to talk with all of you. And I also want to do a big shout out for Jane Rogan. I had the pleasure of talking with her this morning. She's already been doing a lot of the asset-based community development approaches, and it sounds like she's well on her way to doing this. So I want to thank you for that, and I hope this isn't too redundant because you're already doing a lot of this. And I want to also thank Brandy Langley. I don't know if she's here. Where's Brandy? There? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I want to thank you because she helped me with my very quirky travel arrangements because I hate to fly. And so I got here by train and bus and driver service. Yes. Because you never know about winter weather flying. So, and also there was a very nice box in my room that had cookies and caramel corn, and I'm like, wow, this is really great. I got snacks and yummies in my room, so thank you for doing that. So today I'm going to talk about just the foundations of asset-based community development. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. This is really the story of how Lisa got schooled. And I'm going to talk about a time frame from approximately 1997 to about 2008 and talk about some of my experiences. And then I'm going to talk about some other things as well. And I'm talking about a time when there was not a lot of cell phone use, and of course Amazon didn't exist. So I just want you to keep that in mind as I'm talking about some of my experiences with the neighborhood. Oh, I forgot my water. And I get dry, so I promise you there's no vodka in here. This is just straight water. So, all right, let's get this going. So I always like to start with this PowerPoint. It's just the whole idea of building from the inside out. So I want to say hello again. Thank you, Indiana Community Builders. Thank you for your interest. And thank you for coming today, because it really is true. One person can do so much. So I am a cyclist. I'm a long-distance cyclist. So our favorite movie in Michigan with all of our cycling clubs is Breaking Away. We love you guys. It's our cult movie. And the reason I couldn't come in November when Dr. Burkhardt asked me to was I'm the Michigan State Director for the Michigan State Championship cyclocross racing. And so we hold that every year in my backyard, which is a big county park, and every year our little community theater shows Breaking Away, and it gets the community all ramped up for cycling season. So I also think the movie's a good metaphor for ABCD, so you're going to see a little bit about this later on. But I just want you to know that we love this movie, we love Bloomington, and I think I'm going to come down with my cycling club members for the Little 500, because that is such a cool event. I mean, we watch this, we look at you guys all the time, but now that I'm here, I need to come back for this. Anyway, so my goal today is to shift your thinking from a deficiency orientation. So this is Lisa in the morning. I am like useless. I have to ease into consciousness with my coffee. It's brutal. And I'm so glad that Dr. Burkhardt had this at noon, so it wasn't like doing a little 7:30 in the morning. This is me in the morning. And so I had to really shift my thinking about mornings. You know, enjoy the sunrise, get up, have your coffee, relax. And I've always liked this quote by Hafiz. I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness the astonishing light of your being. Because everyone here has this light. And we can also help a community shift to think of itself having its own light and its own assets, and that its members have gifts, talents, and skills, and we need to shine a light on those. So with community partners, we can also help a community shift their lens as well. So our community's complex masses of needs and problems, or our community's diverse and potent web of gifts and assets? Well, they're both. We all know that communities have needs and problems and issues. We know that. And we've built an entire culture and community of assessing communities with the former. But we also now have lots of tools and methodologies and blended approaches to look at communities as a potent web of gifts and assets. Okay, I'm an English major. Everybody says that's the most useless degree in the world. But I have not found that so, because relanguaging with a community is fascinating, especially when they shift to the language of asset-based community development. So we're going to talk about that. What is ABCD? It identifies and mobilizes, and harnesses is the action part of ABCD. It's a process. It facilitates changes in the community from the inside out. And as I go through my presentation, you'll see what I mean by that. Because individual capacities and community assets are mobilized and harnessed and unleashed. They can be unleashed. I think of it as an actionable item, doing something, not just looking at assets of a community. Identification is the sexy part. You go in and help people identify the things they can do. The hard work, where the rubber meets the road, what do we do with all the abundance we've uncovered? That's where the real work comes in. So one of my messages today is that communities are not built on their deficiencies. We can needs assess a community to death, and you know what we've done? We've quantified their misery. Everybody knows now what their weaknesses are and their problems and who can't do what. And asset-based is just the inversion of that. So today it's not a panacea for everything that's wrong with communities. It's just another way to think, and it's another thing to add to your toolbox when you're working with communities. And in ABCD, the process is the outcome. If you have good process, you will have good outcomes. So helping our communities to see that we're all connected, that we all have gifts, talents, and skills, that we all have purpose, we're all here for a reason, and we need to embrace that and build on that. So why ABCD? Shifting is a process, so we start with what is strong, not what is wrong. And I got that phrase from my very good friend, I have to tell you, Jane, he's from the UK, Cormac Russell, really cool guy. Does a lot of work in Britain, Ireland, and he always has, start what is strong, not what is wrong. So I'm using that. But it's a process. It gives communities a toolbox, a different way to look at themselves, and some things they can wrap their hands around to start their own process of asset mapping and capacity building. And why? Because we want communities to connect by their strengths, their capacities. Everybody has gifts, talents, and skills. Every single person in this room can do something really cool. Matter of fact, frequently when I do icebreakers at big groups, when I'm doing speaking engagements, I tell people to tell their neighbors something that you've done or experienced that's so cool, it would surprise them. And you can't believe the things we found out that people have done. It's just, it sort of brings people together to hear that. So we want to know how people connect by their strengths. Because, you know, when I was in high school, I got sent to detention, not paying attention. Well, what do you learn in detention? All the bad ways to get away with stuff. But if you put people in a room where everybody knows how to do stuff, you know, then that's a whole different story. So this is where my journey started in Saginaw, Michigan. And this is where it is in Michigan, Saginaw County. It's an old General Motors town. Big automotive industry town, had multiple GM plants and suppliers, and then in the 60s and 70s, the plant shut down. And Saginaw, the city of Saginaw went from 120,000 to about 55,000 people. And the people that could afford to move away did. A lot of people went to Texas to work in the oil business. A lot of people that couldn't afford stayed, and they stayed in the neighborhoods. And over time, people didn't pay attention to the neighborhoods. So the Saginaw River empties out into Lake Huron. If you're on the west side of the river, you have access to resources. You have grocery stores, you have gas stations, you have banks. But if you live in the Cathedral District, which is where I took a job at 48, they had nothing. I mean, this is a neighborhood of 8,000 to 10,000 people, no access to banks, no gas stations, no grocery stores. Where did they get their food? Where are the senior citizens on walkers who can't drive? How do they live? So I was hired by St. Mary's of Michigan, which is right in the middle, right here. It's a big tertiary care hospital, and right in the middle of the Cathedral District. And they asked me if I could work with neighbors to start looking at some kind of healthy approaches. And that's when I called John McKnight at the ABCD Institute and said, I can't go in there and start asking these people about their needs. That is very disrespectful. Why would I do that? I need to be asking them positive things about themselves so they can build on their strengths. So I worked with him, and I was able to get my staff, which I hired all from the neighborhood, and my board of directors, and we went to Chicago and met with John and spent a couple days with him. And it really, really changed my thinking. So here's the waterfront. These buildings right here, when I was there, were old, crummy, falling apart, dilapidated warehouses and things. And now that one on the left, the sort of light beige one, that's the new home of the Saginaw County Community Foundation. They got that building renovated, it's beautiful. And the one down the way, the tall red building, that thing was, that's where a lot of drug dealers hung out when I was there. But now they're turning into condos on the river. I mean, it's beautiful what happened in 22 years. So a lot of change has happened since the neighbors decided to rethink their neighborhood. I was going to say something else, but it will come to me. Okay, so is the community glass half empty or half full? If we continue to needs assess communities, they will always know about their emptiness. They will always know what they can't do because we're here telling them what they can't do. And when we do that, we tend to look at our neighbors or our community residents as clients and customers, people that are dependent on us for our professional expertise when they actually have a lot of expertise among them. But if we look at the glass half full because we're doing ABCD approaches, we start to see a completely different view of this community. We start to see people as citizens, and what do citizens do? Citizens take action. They're engaged with their community. They want change. They want to see improvements. And citizens have capacities and gifts. And when they get together by their common gifts and passions and capacities, they take action. Because when you get a bunch of people together who have a passion for something, nothing can stop that determination. Oh, let me go back to that. I did have a neighbor once that said, Lisa, I'm tired of that slide. I said, okay, tell me about that. And he said, we're not half full or half empty. We're overflowing with abundance. And our challenge now is to manage our abundance. I'm like, whoa. So, okay. So, they start thinking differently. And like I said, they're telling me how to think. So here's a generic needs map. This might be a generic needs map for an urban area. You might see that you have school dropouts and gang members and child abuse and teenage mothers. You might see high addiction and crime. And of course, with the opioid crisis, that has changed everything, especially in our rural areas. You might see homelessness, truancy. You can see all these things. We can go on forever, and you see a lot of that in urban areas. But what happens when you start needs assessing from that point of view? People in that community internalize that needs assessment, and they make a mental map of themselves, because if all they ever hear is the bad stuff about themselves, that's how they come to see themselves. Local efforts are destroyed as people need professionals to come in and solve their problems, and the efforts to solve problems and meet needs becomes fragmented because everybody's off doing their own thing. People aren't gathered around their assets. They're focusing on who can come in and do something for them. So the community's own problem solving becomes denied, especially the local wisdom. And wisdom is something you really want to capture when you're trying to look at the assets of a community. Some programs reinforce the needs map. How many people here have written a grant? Okay, that's what I thought. And guess what you have to do for a grant? You have to write a needs statement. Yes. And the better you show their needs, the more money you get. It's like a vicious cycle. And then if you want second or third or fourth year funding, you go back and you make the needs even worse. And you get more money, right? It's something backwards. So this is starting to change. I think the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Kellogg Foundation and the Macy Foundation, which supports IPE projects, which asset-based lends itself to interprofessional experiences really, really well with students from various fields and disciplines. So they're really looking at strong proposals that have A, B, C, D. So also you always have a leader in the community that wants to get on TV and tell you how awful the community is and rant and rave and say things about the community, because that reinforces their sense of importance. The media, it bleeds. It bleeds, it leads. We had this issue in Saginaw with the Saginaw News. The first day on the job, the FBI decided to say that Saginaw was the most dangerous city in the country. That was my first day on the job. Lordy, what did I get myself into? But over time, of course, that changed. But trying to get our media to change from that mindset was a whole different issue, and it took decades to get them to do that. So efforts to obtain resources forces the community to continue to denigrate itself and show itself in a bad situation. And then if this is just a cycle going on and on, people tend to have a sense of despair and hopelessness because they don't see anything they can do to move forward. So let's start assessing and mapping community assets. And I want you to notice this is sort of in the format of 3 concentric circles. All the power of a community is right here, smack dab in the middle. It's people. Whenever I go out and I do workshops like this and I talk with people, or I do an asset mapping workshop, I say to people, what are your community assets? They always go for the institutions. I said, well, what about your people? What kind of gifts, talents, and skills do they have? They go, I don't know. I said, have you asked? No. So this is where we start, the gifts of our artists, our culture, the gifts of the elderly, the wisdom keepers, the people who are connected, that raw energy of youth. Youth love to do community projects. And then, of course, people that have income that donate to our organizations and foundations with giving, that really helps to bring resources. A very overlooked part of community is the associational life. You know, your service clubs, your self-help groups, your churches, your social groups, they frequently have a mission to serve the community. And they're looking for projects. And sometimes if a group of people that are just on fire with a project they want to do because it's been identified through an asset map, these folks want to work on this, your associations will back them, sometimes even provide funding. And then you have the next layer, the third circle, that's your institutions, your universities, your parks, your hospitals, your libraries, and your nonprofits. So outcomes of asset mapping. Again, that means starting what's strong, not what's wrong. Supporting the local insights. The insights that people have are invaluable, especially people that have lived there a long time. Building relationships is essential to building community. I worked with John McKnight and Jody Kretzman, the two directors of the ABCD Institute, when they were located at Northwestern University. And Jody used to always say to me, when I hear the word data, I'm not in community. Community people don't use that word like that. Institutions use that word. So that always stuck in my head. So if we're not building long-term relationships with our community, we're not community building. We're just going in, grabbing data, mining resources, and then putting it out either in papers or in projects or in grants, using it for our betterment. Our very first rule before going into a community should be, how is this going to help the community long term? How is it going to allow the community voice to emerge? So it can say what it wants us to do. We're here to serve. If a project isn't doing that, it's not community building. I told Todd beforehand, I said, I'm really hardcore about this, so I might say a few things. But the whole idea of building respectful, meaningful relationships fosters that new language. So assets give community members a new way to describe themselves. They shift out of that need-speak. Need-speak. Like when I was in Saginaw, the neighborhood I worked in was a low-income, minority, medically underserved, crime-ridden neighborhood because that's what our needs assessment said. You think the neighbors that live there want to describe themselves that way? No. So once we started doing capacity inventories and asset mapping, they had a new language. And we used to go to Saginaw News and say, we'd like the headline to be, we have discovered and identified 6,982 gifts, talents, and skills in this neighborhood that you're calling a poor neighborhood. They never did that headline for us, but we put pressure on them anyway. So it creates this new knowledge base of know-how. That thing I'm talking about is an intangible asset. Everybody knows how to do something. Everybody in this room is multi-talented. We just don't know because we haven't asked each other. We haven't done a capacity inventory with each other. So communities aren't built on their deficiencies because deficiencies don't build good process. And ABCD builds good process. Now this is a picture of a German Shepherd looking at a gerbil. And of course my neighbor said, Lisa, that dog's going to eat that thing. I said, no, it's not. But my point about this is ABCD also tends to draw different, unusual partnerships that might not have happened because people can find common ground. So never think that what you have to offer is insignificant. Somebody needs what you can give. And we're in the gift business. We're in the business of identifying gifts here. So, shifting to asset-based thinking, if we're totally steeped on the left side of the screen, we are proscribing a therapeutic vision for that community. Because we're looking at deficits and needs, we're looking at problems, pathologies, we're focusing on fixing and doing for that community. We're bringing in outside services, which assumes the people inside the community can't do some of that work, and we're treating them like clients and customers or research subjects. And that kind of approach is very unconcerned about relationship building. But if we shift to the community vision of assets, we start to focus on what is strong. It supports the individual capacities of each person. And we talk about needs as issues, because no matter what you do, when you're talking to neighbors and community members, they're going to tell you it's wrong anyway. The needs come out anyway. So it's better that they come out through the ABCD part. And it focuses on self-reliance and makes people co-producers. So we have a program called Community-Defined Health. Our neighbors produce health. They produce their own health. And the health they produce is used by the local physicians and local nursing associations. So I'll talk about a little bit about that in a minute. So that's called Inside Out. Citizens become producers. When I worked with the Saginaw and Chippewa Indian tribes, because I live on an Indian reservation close to one, we did co-producing education with the tribal school, with the parents. We asked them, what are the assets and capacities and things that you do to help your child learn on res? And after we mapped all that and put it all together, they realized that they were producing part of the education that their kids needed, all the support services and all the connections. So that is what builds strong relationships. So communities that speak capacity have hope, they have resiliency, they have faith, they know how to partner with people and seek out people that have similar gifts, talents, and skills. They build a community, a regional vision for themselves, and of course, they're connected. So here's the Cathedral District Neighborhood Capacity Inventory. It's 4 pages long, and it took us 8 months to write this. The main goal they wanted to achieve was to reduce the isolation and alienation of the neighborhood. So they wanted to get people together and have them ask each other questions. And when you do a capacity inventory, you don't take it. You already know what your gifts and talents and skills are. Oops, that's me. You have someone ask you so they can learn what your gifts, talents, and skills are. So they came up with this, and I know you can't really see this. So my first question, have you ever helped organize a community social activity? Their goal is to get people out of their house, get them to walk across the street, and who's their neighbor? And we had yes, no, do you want to? That's what the W is. Do you want to? And we asked all kinds of things, like, would you provide a dish for a neighborhood picnic? And when they started talking to each other, we started tracking all of this with the neighbors and found out people knew how to throw a good party. And so that's exactly what they did. So this is one of the original slides from like around 1998, before a lot of people knew how to do Excel and all that. I think it's a table. And we asked people, what can you do? Well, this guy, I eat well. So that's my gift. I love to eat. I love food. I'm a pretty huge guy. I just love to eat. Well, we found out we had 15 cooks, retired cooks in the neighborhood that had worked at local schools or maybe for the hospital, and they retired. So what's the connection? We made him the official taster of the cooks. So he would get together with the ladies and they would cook food like every quarter and provide food for the neighborhood, and he would tell everybody, this is what's on the menu. So, but you can see, I execute a party. Okay, you're in charge of the picnic. We can help you organize the picnic. I can supervise. I lead prayer. I'm good at exercising. I repair window sashes. At first you're like, oh, he's nodding his head. You know how to do that, don't you? See right there. Okay, I like that. I'm going to talk to you. So when you're in a neighborhood where all the homes are blighted, guess what? This is a huge thing. You want people that know how to do that kind of stuff. So you can see people could do all kinds of things. And here's some more. We had people that said, I help and encourage people. We found out we had a research historian preservationist in the neighborhood. Now, Saginaw is an old lumbering town. At the turn of the century, a lot of lumber barons lived there. These people got very wealthy, and they had these huge mansions. And this guy said, I'll help research the history of the neighborhood so everybody can share it and write a book, and we'll get everybody's input. So he did that. So, you never know what's in the community until you start looking. So after we started doing this, we found out that we sort of became a small economic development organization, even though it was like a healthcare nonprofit, because we started finding jobs for people. We found out all the people that had child care experience got jobs with Michigan State University Extension because they were building a new child care facility network. We had a lady, her gift, I know how to fold napkins 40 different ways. Now, you might think that's useless, but when we got to know her, we asked her why, who knows how to fold napkins 40 different ways? She said, well, I had a stroke. And in order to get use of my hands back, I started looking at pictures and folding napkins. And then we found out that she also was a graduate of the Flint Professional Cooking School. And we connected her to the Girls Youth Group program, and she taught the young ladies in the neighborhood etiquette and how to cook. And so she loved it. She was just a perfect instructor. Then we had our 5 Healthy Future Guides. Now today, these would be called community health workers. I'm sure you guys have heard of that too. But back in the late 90s, we didn't have those. These are busybodies of the neighborhood. All communities have gossipers and busybodies, right? Well, we don't want to give a negative name, so we call them capacity development. So they became our Healthy Future Guides. They know where everything is. Need to go to the Social Security office? They know that Linda works there from 8 to 4. Here's your phone number. This is what she's going to tell you. Do you need to go to the public health department to get WIC? Oh yeah, that's Alice. I know her. I'll get you an appointment with her. They know everything. So we made them guides, and they guided people from the neighborhood around to the services that they need. We found that our cooks wanted to start a catering business, and we got the hospital to purchase catering services from our neighborhood group when it was an external community function. We had people that loved to be outside, do lawn care. They just had to be outside. So they got together and put a lawn care business together. Neighbors become members of a credit union. After we'd been doing this a while, the neighborhood had a credit union, but you could only go to it if you derived your income from an educational institution. Well, that left out every neighborhood. And what good is that? So we went to the managers, and this was a neighbor's idea. Well, tell them we're getting educated about each other because we're doing our capacity inventory. So we went and they opened it up to everybody. And all of a sudden, people had financial services on the east side of Florida. And we had renovation skills. We always have people like you that love to do sashes, know how to glaze windows, just know how to do that kind of stuff. They have know-how. I'm like useless at that stuff. My husband's great, but I'm useless. So they got together and they put a little nonprofit and they called it Hearts with Hammers. And they had a fundraiser. And in order to get in the fundraiser, you had to bring a tool. And they staffed themselves with tools so they could go out the road or go in the neighborhood and help like elderly and disabled fix their homes. We have our historic researcher published the monthly articles about the neighborhood. So people started learning things where they were living that they never even knew. We had artifact recovery from those old homes. There were beautiful old oak mantles and crystal chandeliers and marble top tables from the lumber baron era in homes that were falling down. And so we asked the city if we could go in there and take that stuff, and they said yes. They had a DBO on the building, it's a dangerous building ordinance. We got special permission and we grabbed that stuff, and some of our neighbors turned it into architectural elements business. So, I mean, these folks just knew how to get stuff done. And then we had a business asset directory for the neighborhood. So here's our newsletter. This is completely done by neighbors. The copy, some of our capacity developers, they always knew everything was going on. So they'd go out and find out stories and report. And we had people like to write, we had people who could edit, and we had people who could do layout on their computer, and then the hospital would print this for us, and we'd get it out to all of our neighbors, and we print like 5,000 copies of this. So more people started coming to the neighborhood association meetings because they're getting connected and getting the newsletter. This is the Cathedral District Business Assets Directory. All the artwork, again, done by the neighbors. And all the things that people could do so well that they could get paid for, we put it in this directory, and it became a little economic stream in the neighborhood. People started buying services from each other, and they were able to give their gifts and make a little income. So that started getting people connected as well. Neighbors got interested in restoring their homes, and you can see the one on the left. We used to take our medical and nursing students on a tour through this home and show them what could be possible, because this on the right-hand side is what they had seen and heard about the neighborhood. But they started to see this too, and it changed their perspective of the neighborhood. And this is the neighborhood picnic. Now, I had to get an insurance binder from the hospital. This is the park behind the hospital. I had to get an insurance binder for $1 million in case there was an incident. They said, Lisa, someone's going to shoot somebody at the picnic. I said, I'm out there now. break, I was a judge, that's me, for the kids' talent show. It's really fun. Have the kids sing and dance and rap and read their poetry. It was just breathtaking to see the range of talent of our kids in the neighborhood. And then we, of course, had the police come and have the kids climb through the car and run the sirens. So their first encounter with the police would be positive, not negative. And we would have our bakers get together. This is Ana Hidalgo. She taught a lot of kids Spanish. She's an expert baker. And we'd get our kids together and show them how to use measuring cups and rolling pins, and we would make Christmas cookies. We would bake every year about 4,000 Christmas cookies, and each kid could take home a platter of cookies, and we gave all the rest to nursing homes or, senior high-rise housing or something. So what people say to me, so anyway, that experience profoundly changed my life. Like I said, I really got to school, really began to understand that all those years I've been doing needs assessment, there are other ways to look at community. So I got invited by a nonprofit organization to come up to the northern part of the province of Quebec, just south of the Arctic Circle, to do ABCD. So I'm in a remote wilderness area now. Many of these little villages along the northern lower shore are English speaking, but in the province of Quebec, French is the official language, so they did not always reap the benefits of all the other residents of the province. So they asked me to come up and do some ABCD with them. So I went up to the lower North Shore because they had lost their fishing industry, their forestry industry. There are no roads except for a very short stretch. They're only accessible by bush plane and boats in the summer, and the only way you can get around in the winter is by snowmobiles when the lakes freeze. That's the only way you can get around. You can't get around. And I said, and they told me that the province was going to cut off their utilities because it basically said, you're not producing anything. These communities aren't doing anything. Why should we give you electricity and water? That's what they told me. So I went up there and I met with them, and I said, yeah, I'll come up in the summer. It'll be really pretty. And they said, oh no, you don't come up in the summer. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh no, you have to come in the winter. It has to be at least 25 below. I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, that's when we get around. We get on our snowmobiles and we can go visit like our parents in the next village over, or our adult children in the next village over. Oh my God. Okay. So here I am. Here I am. 25 below. And you can see the fishing shanties, and I've never driven a snowmobile, and they said, nah, we'll drive you, it's okay. But this is St. Paul's, and that's where I stayed, and there's no hotels up here. There's no construction companies, you build your own house. You have to learn how to build, or you don't have a house. So that's what all the people in the village do, they build their own things. And this is Blanc c'est Blanc. I had learned a little French. And it looked like a moonscape when I was up there. It looked like fishing shanties primarily. And we worked with them. We had a little party. We went around on snowmobiles. And this is a little road. And right across the way is Labrador. So the road to Blanc c'est Blanc. Here's a person's house. They sent me a picture. This is what our house looks like in the winter. Are you sure you want me to come up there? But I did. It was fun, actually. It was primitive, but it was fun. So we did ABCD trainings, and I had the people from the community were with me all the time. So we really made good friends and connections. And we began ABCD practices. We inventoried villagers' gifts, talents, and skills. And we discovered that all of the unemployed fishermen had one thing in common. They were all woodworkers. Everybody was a woodcrafter. And so they got together and they started making these beautiful flower boxes. And this is just when the internet was really getting strong. And they started selling them, so they're producing them. And eventually, I found out a couple years ago, they're exporting them all over the world now. These beautiful flower boxes that are hand carved. We found out that several of the youth, I don't know if it's in their DNA or whatever, but they all could sing. Maybe it's all married, I don't know. But they all had really good music ability. So we were able to get them to go down to Sept-Îles, which is 7 islands, and there was a small recording studio, and they made a little album, and then they sold it, and they got instruments to build their music room back up near Blomstead Run. And the community members also wanted to have radio stations so they could talk to each other in the winter. So we got an expert who is good at setting up radio stations from Montreal, and she helped teach the neighbors, and then they did their own programming. So just like the Cathedral District did a newsletter, these folks did radio stations so they could talk to each other. And there's a berry that grows up there that grows nowhere else in the world, so they started to make their own jam and jelly and export that. And I said, you should really consider, creating eco-tourism. I said, crazy Americans will come and kayak around this iceberg. I guarantee it, they will. And so they thought about that, and I said, what's the #1 issue of our rural communities? Our youth leave. They don't come back. Well, you've got extra bedrooms, don't you? You can go on the vacation rental sites and rent out, and people can kayak, and they did that. So there I am, just sitting around. This is at a restaurant at one of the little villages we stopped at when I was on a snowmobile party, going through the province there, just talking with neighbors, and the lady right there was with me, and she's talking to some of the residents in her community, and I pretty much listened, but it was a really positive experience. And here we are again. This is me. I look like the Michelin Man because I'm so bundled up, on the back of the snowmobile, I can't move. But this is our party going from village to village, and we stayed in people's houses because there's no hotels, so you stay in someone's house. And that's me in the bottom with my translator, Brenda. I thought, well, if I get sick or I go to the hospital, I want someone to speak French. So she came with me. And I hate flying, but I flew Air Labrador just to get up to Blomstead Lawn. But I had to take a picture of the plane because it was something else. You're sitting behind the cockpit watching the pilot land right down in this little landing strip. Whoa. And this is St. Paul again. And at night, these are the highways on the frozen lakes. And so they put old Christmas trees and stakes. That's the center line. And you have traffic on the right and traffic coming down on the left. And that's how they get back and forth to the village. And there we are. And that's me on the lower right. The guy behind me with the mask, that's the Minister of Health from the province of Quebec. He was following me. I knew he's following me, so I'm going to follow this crazy lady. But he did. But all these people came together and went from village to village. And it was a blast, actually. I did this for an entire week. So the difference between building communities from the inside out instead of outside in, again, on the left side, if you're looking at outside in, this is the kind of stuff you're going to find when you do your research. You go on Google or whatever, you're going to find the sociodemographics, prevalence of disease, you're going to find the disease indicators, risk factors, census data, all this kind of stuff that is crunched by actuarials. Unemployment, underserved areas, poverty rates, all that kind of stuff. That is crunched by actuarials that have never been to your community. They have no idea what the quality of the relationships are in your community. They've never been there. They're number crunchers. That's what you see if you're doing that kind of research. But if you're doing inside out mapping and going to communities, this is what you will see. Because you're going to be building community because you're building relationships. Quality of local relationships. How do people connect in this community? How do they talk to each other? Who are the indigenous leaders? Who are the informal leaders? That's one thing I love about ABCD. It fleshes out the real leaders. Local places that promote gatherings and exchange. One time did an ABCD workshop with my friends up in Clare County, which is the county north where I live in the middle of Michigan. It's the poorest county in the state, and here it's 12 miles north of a medical school. And when I worked at the medical school, my last job of my career, I reported directly to the dean, and I said, you need to put some student notations and put some FQHC or practices up there. This is disgusting. We have a medical school, and that is the poorest county in our state. So anyway, we took a big, huge map of the county, and we had people pinpoint all the places in the county where they felt respected, where they felt it was trustworthy, and they could talk with people. And it was so interesting to see what those places looked like. And they were places like camps, Girl Scout or Boy Scout camps, or some churches, some schools, some business, but it's just interesting to map it out. And everybody knows what lawn resources are, right? Everybody, you know, when you go into a community, you find out lawn. Everybody knows what lawn is, right? Word of mouth. Wow, you gotta go find the wow resources. So, like if I ask you guys, what's the best place to eat in Bloomington? You guys would know, wouldn't you? Because you're the local wisdom keepers and you know what's really good. You would know. That's word of mouth. So, best kept information, the local wisdom for staying healthy. I'm sure some of you could tell me because I'm a cyclist where are some great trails to cycle, or whatever people wanted to find out, high trust factor areas, civic engagement, who are the local leaders. This is what you're going to find out if you're taking asset-based approaches. Human creativity is the ultimate economic resource. We don't know what people can do until we ask them. Now here's Jeff, he's the one that eats well, he's on the left. He hates it, but I still show this slide to him. And on the right is Bakari, this is some of my staff, and Healthy Community Partners, that was my organization, they're out teaching this stuff now. They're out teaching it. They're the experts, not me. And this is in front of the, they're teaching this at the Covenant neighborhood, that's on the west side. Because once the Cathedral District started changing itself, all the other neighborhoods said, what are you doing over there? You know, neighborhoods are very parochial, they're like foreign countries, just like counties are. And so Jeff and Bakari and some of the other staff are still there doing ABCD. So, getting out of the office is really crucial. My advice, I always tell people, I did a big workshop for the Saginaw Community Foundation, and they said, well, how do we approach people? I said, get out of the office, be a neighbor. You don't have to go do anything, just go and listen, be a part of them. So they started going to the neighborhood association meetings and just sitting there and saying, you know, they'd ask if they could attend, and they'd say, sure. And they'd go to the meeting, and people would say, oh, it's really nice that you're here. We never thought the foundation would come to one of our neighborhood meetings, you know, so that was the first step. And after they got used to them coming, they started asking them questions, and vice versa. And then they found out that the foundation had certain kinds of little grants and programs that could support some of the initiatives the neighbors wanted to take. So this little equation, trust equals consistency over time. If you're going to work in a community, the number one factor is a relationship with trust. Doesn't matter what you're doing. It took me 2 years to build the trust of the neighbors in the Cathedral District. I was invited to give a report on my work to the board of directors of the hospital after 2 years. And they said, what is your biggest outcome? And I said, the neighbors trust me now. Now we can start having a conversation. They finally trust me. So this is really important when you're doing work out in communities. Make sure you have that long vision, whatever you're doing. You can be consistent and be out there regularly. Or if you say have student teams out there for IPE projects or experiences, make sure you can commit to a long term, because if you put a project out there with a community and all of a sudden you stop, they'll never trust you again. They'll say, well, this university is going in and out of our community, they're just using us. So just something to think about. Be where residents gather, talk less, listen more. Remember that positive, respectful, trusting relationships are the currency of ABCD. Use and share ABCD tools, capacity inventories, asset mapping. Remember, the language determines a community's reality. If they learn to speak about themselves positively, that's how they will come to see themselves. And lead by stepping back and serving as a resource. And here I am. I'm sorry for the fuzzy picture. This is in the First Ward neighborhood. We were asset mapping like crazy that day, and we had nursing students in there with neighbors who went out, assessed, and talked to families and asked them, what are the assets of this neighborhood? And so this is, there's Jeff, Mr. Eagle over there. He was like ubiquitous, he's everywhere. And this is Amos O'Neill, and Amos and I got very close. He was in community college at this time, and he's staring at the assets. He got so enamored of this process. He was inspired to go finish his degree and got a degree at Saginaw Valley in criminal justice. And then he ran for city council, got on city council, and then he ran for mayor. He was mayor of Saginaw. And now he's running for the local rep in the House of Rep for Michigan. He's just a cool guy. And so, I mean, it inspires people in different ways. You never know what effect you're having on people. I'm sorry for the blast of text. I'm sorry for this. But I just want to get through a couple of points here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. And we're going to do a little teeny capacity inventory. So, ABCD approaches plus citizen action is the hallmark for change. That's where the magic happens, right there. Community leaders tend to wake up. They see a bunch of citizens engaged in their passion. They'll say, oh, well, maybe we should put some money toward that, or here's a piece of land you can use, or here's an institution, we'll make copies for you. They wake up because they see citizens are becoming impassioned and involved. The community residents are the major evaluators using positive language. Community groups become trainers in ABCD tools and can spread the good word. Residents track health assets and social determinants. A lot of my work was focused on healthy communities, so we did track the social determinants of health every year over a decade. And we found that from the first year, we went from high crime, little health, to the 10th year, because that's how long it took for this neighborhood to shift itself. It was high health, low crime. That's what changed. Let's see, booming health initiatives from residents. Those that like to walk created a brochure and did walking routes in the neighborhood, and then handed all these brochures out to doctors' offices and said, if you have, say, cardiac patients that need to walk so many steps a day, here's our brochure, call us, we'll have some walkers, they'll go out and walk with them. I mean, there's just cooking classes, our cooks, community gardeners, our gardeners. Now, you know what happens when you get gardeners together, right? They spend the first 2 hours talking about the best manure, honest to God. Right? Because that's what they do. But once we got past best fertilizer, then they started about, talking about what kind of beautification projects do you want. So they did a lot of community gardening. So leadership discovery is really one of the primary goals of ABCD. So I tell people the greatest diversity is the proliferation of gifts and the giftedness of your community. If people aren't allowed to contribute and give their gifts, they will feel unappreciated and they will leave. And people will leave the community. If people are allowed to give their gifts and express their know-how in a positive way, they will stay, they will feel recognized, respected, and they will want to stay in their community. Okay, so the takeaway is breaking away. I had to get back to it. Breaking away, one of my favorite movies. So the goal of ABCD is to achieve that better balance between service delivery organizations and recognize an asset-based community building and recognize you can do it together. You can blend this. Since this time, I've worked in hundreds of communities and used all kinds of blendings of ABCD with other strength-based approaches. You can use it any way you want, really, if you're creative. Put empowerment of individuals and communities and reducing social isolation at the heart of your action. If you're doing a project with a community, your number one hypothesis or mission should be, how is this going to improve the community? Not, am I going to get paid for this? And then the last one, if we're not building relationships, we are not building community. And you can see you've got cutters over here. They won 500. Now, the rest of the community looked at them as losers, right? They're not losers. They got together, they got motivated, they found their passion. We're going to win this race. We're all bicyclists. Well, most of them are bicyclists. And we're going to win. And they did. And this is Lisa out riding her bike with her girlfriends on the rails and trails. We just did 32 miles that week. So that's the very short version of asset-based community development. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to do, how many are on time?
We're good.
Oh, good, okay. Now, I know you're going to groan because everybody hates interactive exercises. So, I get that. So, what we're going to do, because in profound awkwardness is when you have the best connection. That's been my experience. Profound awkwardness. Really. So, oh, you got it. Okay. So this is what this is going to be real short. We're going to do just real short. We're going to talk about gifts of the head, and the hands, and the heart. Okay? So organized, you know how to get things done, you can sort of see it, you have that vision of how to get things done. Those are gifts of the head. Gifts of the hand, you can cook or bake or woodwork, or you're a good mechanic, or you're an artist. Anything that you can do with your hands, sewing, crocheting, anything like that, those are gifts of the hand. And then gifts of the heart, things that you have a passion for, that you would go to the mat for. What is your passion? Is your passion to coach little kids and help them achieve their goals in, say, Little League Baseball? Is your goal to help stray animals find their owners? Is your passion to work at a food pantry where you volunteer? Or anything that you think really is something that's near and dear to your heart? So, I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this. I want you to turn to your neighbor, preferably someone you don't know. You might have to reach out across to another table. Oh my gosh. And ask somebody, ask them, get their first name, and get a gift of their head, hand, and heart. And then once you have it, I want you to switch. And that person needs to ask you your name and ask you your gifts of head, hand, and heart. In about 7-8 minutes, and we're going to have a few brave volunteers tell us what they learned about this. Okay, go. If you have any questions, let me know.
You gotta go.
That was harder for me. I know. I'm a pretty good cook. I would say
you know, like where they buy up some teaching time. You can become a liaison to the school. Okay, that's a great idea.
does your doctor have any like trying to figure out how to
Like, I feel like it'd be so easy to say. I think we need to have but if they're pushing us in that direction, then they need to match it up with the other part. Planting the seed is pretty
Oh yeah, but I think the thing that I feel like we need
I can play the organ.
like really
I can make it. Yeah, it's really awesome.
One half minute to wrap up. Everybody knows their gift and name. You guys all set over here? All right. What team of 2 people would like to volunteer to tell us the name of the person that they interviewed and what their discount is? Who would like to, what team would like to volunteer to do that?
Can we have like a few more minutes? Can we have one more minute?
Oh, sure.
We're threesome here.
Oh, okay, sure.
So you're just innovating your own.
It takes me forever to order.
That's my friends kind of observing as like a skill. I also do a lot of artistic things like painting, art, like make salads, garden.
Yes, you do.
Hands are really cool.
Yes, you do.
And then I use that mostly looking at you. Yeah. I like the raw public health concept.
Yes, you do. Worry. I wish I liked to work out. You teach?
Is there a team of 2 people who would like to volunteer to just tell us a little bit about what they learned? Don't be shy. This is where the profound
That's for the share.
Okay, Dan? Yeah, here we go. Microphone.
Now introduce your person and then tell us on.
So my person was Jane Logan, who I've known sort of superficially, but not at sort of about her assets, if you will.
Turn it up.
So
There we go.
so her head thing is that she is able to have people trust her, which I think is really huge because nobody trusts me. It should, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And then hands, she's good at building things, cooking, and planting. And then heart, her passion is sort of it's not really finding inequity, but identifying inequities and injustices and sort of calling them out to people.
Very good.
And making sure that, they see the light of day.
Very good. Thank you so much, sir. All right, and we'll switch here.
So I had the great pleasure of talking to my longtime colleague, Dan Knudsen, and he's correct, we have never really sat down and talked about our assets together. So Dan is a strategic thinker, that's his head. I had to explain that to me because I am not a chess player. His hands, he's incredibly good at building things, and he's a remarkably good cook, which is also then I think linked to his heart, because his heart is lives with issues of food insecurity and fixing those kinds of problems.
Very good. Thank you so much. Is there another team that just wants to share real quickly?
Yes. Sure. Because I want to tell people what you do.
So, Michaela Word, is it Word?
Word.
Yeah, good. Her head asset is thinking strategically and outside the box. Her hand asset is she crochets, she paints, And she plays piano. That's a real hand asset, isn't it? And then her passion is that she is educating, her desire to educate young, emerging, would you say, teenage, but also emerging adults in sexual health education.
Awesome. All right. Now switch.
We're three-way, so wait, I'm gonna go.
Okay. I might need to.
Here's my notes. They're tiny.
I'm gonna try.
This is Claire, and I'm gonna do this a little backwards. This is what I remember. Claire's heart asset is in food justice, food security, and she is also a fan of playing guitar. So that's her hands,
Okay.
and she used to paint, and she wants to do that some more. And
I'm observant.
yes, she's extremely observant, unlike me. That is her head asset. You might get some tips.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to introduce Tamara, who is a creative thinker, writer, and doer. With her hands, she's an adept fiddler and gardener. And her passion is bringing music to underserved communities, which she does wonderfully through the Lotus Foundation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last one.
Oh, so she is the executive director for the Lotus Foundation in town and organizes all of the music community of that.
Awesome. All right, very good. Thank you. Is there anybody else? We have time for one more. Or are you guys tired, falling asleep after lunch? You guys want to do this, don't you? Oh, you have one over here, okay.
Actually, I'm really getting a
So this is Rachel, and her head asset is with program management, getting people together, accomplishing tasks, and then her hand asset is doing activities with kids. She likes to spend time with kids, and then her heart asset. Oh yes, she loves meeting people and getting to know them, building relationships.
Oh, very good. Okay.
This is Jacob.
Okay.
His okay, it's a lot of pressure now.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
forget it. Forgot the head already. Oh yes, his head asset is listening. Good listener. Hand asset is cleaning and organizing.
Ooh,
Which is
customer
incredibly
useful.
and oh god, that was the one that volunteered. Yes, oh this was great. The heart is supporting people and enabling them to be successful.
Very good. All right, thank you. Okay. Now, normally, working with a community, we get groups together and we go around the whole room and do this. Sometimes we even plaster the wall, depending on how much time. Usually, I don't do this with groups bigger than 25 or 30 because it can be cumbersome. But small groups really have a lot of fun with this. This is just a very short capacity inventory. You can do it on paper, but you have to be talking to the other person. So it works really well. So let me ask you something. Did the energy in the room change a little bit once you did this? It's a little bit better, isn't it? You sort of relax, get to talk to people, right? You know, it's hard to get you to stop talking. Because that's what happens when you start sharing gifts. I mean, you could talk for quite a while and say, I didn't know that about you. Oh, we should do that sometime. You know, those kinds of conversations start. So that's why I think this stuff has worked for so long. When I've seen it over several decades now. And like I said, it's not perfect all by itself, but it's a good way to think about when you're dealing with communities. And again, I want to thank you for letting me do this, because I said I want to do a little interactive exercise. But now I'd be happy to try to answer some questions. We've got some Q&A time. If anybody wants to ask something or say something, I know you wanted to say something.
Well, actually, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
And I'll frame that question with a comment that the work of the center is very much about marrying two communities together, well, one at a time. The Indiana University community, which has a lot of assets, partnering with each individual community. And we're now in 30 different counties, so we have a lot of different communities working together. And our model frequently looks like a member of the CRE staff is the longtime face in a community.
Yes.
And the faculty who have each different projects, they may be in several different communities, bringing their gifts to that community in order to help build an asset or address a need. And sometimes then the word data is used in those communities. And there are papers produced. And so I'm interested in your best feedback when we're taking new faculty, introducing new faculty or staff members into communities. What's the best way to create that bridge? So we're still focused on the community's assets, and we're also leveraging that faculty's assets that they're bringing to share.
Are the other faculty, I mean, I know some faculty members will go in and out because they have a specific set of expertise that the community might want or need. I mean, I think that's fine, as long as if the community is asked for it, I think that's fine to bring other faculty. They know that not everybody's going to spend all their time out there. So I think that's perfectly appropriate, as long as the community sees it as something that they want and they can use it. I think it's great that you can connect faculty with certain expertise to a community that's asking for it. I think being those connectors is really, really important. So I agree with that.
Great.
Yeah.
So I also want the faculty who may be new to understand that that we understand you may engage with the center for a little while or in 5 different communities, but are not going to set up an apartment there.
Right.
We're really, the work of the center is really to create those bridges for you.
Yes, right. And I think that's a perfect model, honestly.
Hi, my name is Katarina. I'm with a community that works with the Center Rural Colloquium in Orange County. And I am wondering about your capacity inventories and if you're able to share those tools with the center and to share with the communities.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. The ABCD Institute, I should have brought it today, it has a relationship with a book publishing company, and they have workbooks that are specific to various things. Like they have a workbook on how to do capacity inventories. It gives you examples. Now, my communities want to make their own, but I can give that information to Dr. Burkhart, and it's really, really helpful. And it talks about steps that you can take to enable a community to build its own capacity inventory, and then to show them examples. And they can either craft their own or they can use them in the book. So the ABCD Institute, their big green book, it's called Building Communities from the Inside Out. It's about this thick, and it's nothing but asset mapping, ideas, and how to work with all, librarians, criminal justice reformers, people in the healthcare field. It's whatever, it's a really good book. But then they have these smaller workbooks that focus on different things. Like there's a workbook on working with rural groups. There's a workbook on how to develop capacity inventory with a community. So I will send Tab all that information, link, and go, and the prices are very reasonable. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you.
So my question was about, I've been working with using the CRE's asset mapping tool, thank you for that, and doing some community listening sessions as part of a project that's being labeled as needs assessment because that's what the organizations that came to
That's what they want.
Well, my approach to it is always, even the last time we went through this, is always strengths. Let's focus first on strengths and assets, and then figure out how to use those to address things that the community identifies as potential needs or opportunities for growth. But one of the things that I've noticed, I did 8 listening sessions in a 2-county area in the fall, and pretty uniformly good conversations about assets and big ideas in most places, but two of those locations where people are struggling more, it was a real effort to get them, I mean, as soon as I opened the floor to talk about, okay, what did you come up with as the strongest assets, they went straight to problems.
Right.
I mean, I really struggled to keep them talking about strengths and assets, and I wondered if you had any tips or strategies when you find yourself in a community where you're really struggling to get people to get their mind into that other place for a little bit.
That always happens. So you're not in isolation with that. Frequently when I'm working with communities and doing workshops, they just go back to what they know, which is needs, because that's their whole paradigm, that's their perspective. It's really hard. Sometimes what I do is I say, let's map issues and let's map assets. So we start talking about assets first, but as soon as they bring up the issues, we put that on the other side of the wall.
Oh, that's what I did.
Okay. No, you're right on track. You are right on track. And then I say, after we've got a whole bunch of issues and needs on this side, and over here are assets, we actually draw physical lines. What are the assets that you could take to address this need?
Okay.
Yeah. You're doing it just right. You're doing it, and it just gets them to think that, oh, we can't address this unless we know this.
Well, yeah, and so just getting them back in the conversation of, let's get back to some strengths. Let's look at some assets. And assets could be just even having a space to meet. We're meeting in this room right now. This is an asset.
And that makes me think, how do they define assets?
Right.
Ask them how they define. You probably did, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I tried to provide lots of possibilities that we could talk about as
Yes,
assets.
okay, then you're, and in the big green book, assets are physical assets, recreational assets, economic assets.
Social capital.
Assets, all that kind of stuff, okay. Economic assets, right. Pardon?
Cultural, yes.
Cultural assets, yes. Okay, very good. I think you're right on the right path. Yep.
I have to speak to this thing. Okay, this question comes from a guy that just swims in data. So, what you just mentioned in terms of.
Hold it closer, I'm sorry. What you just mentioned in terms of, say, that asset and that need. What I'd like to know is, have those networks been formalized in terms of writing them down? Because that is kind of how these relationships, network, graph theory, all that stuff, I mean, if you want to get quantitative about it.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that that would be a great thing to, if you pardon the expression, formalize.
Sure. Oh,
so
sure.
that, and has that been captured
Yes.
in
Yeah,
those formats?
in the
learn from?
early years that I was doing this, I'm trying to think, we had tables and lists, for lack of a better term. Unfortunately, I was in a small nonprofit. I didn't have a lot of funding for really good qualitative research, which I really would have liked. That would have really helped me. I didn't have access to that early on. So the neighbors kept track of it, and then we reviewed it each year to look for the changes. So we did do that, but in terms of formal data gathering, we didn't do that at that level. It wasn't until much later that when I worked more with Saginaw Valley State University that they started tracking it formally, looking at data, and then they would give it back to the community in a form that they could understand. And the community was very happy to have that. They didn't have that. So whatever form that the community seems to like or is attracted to, I would say that's just fine. There's just so many different ways to do it. I have an article on how communities evaluate with evaluators. If you want, I can send that to Todd and have him give it to you if you want. I don't know if you're interested in that.
Sure, I'm interested in the networks.
Yes.
And how the networks are plotted out, because that's kind of like a very big thing.
Yes.
It's growing thing.
Yes. Yes. And in Saginaw, when the neighborhood started picking up the ABCD, it was very informal how they shared their information with each other. But one thing we did, and I know Dr. Burkhardt and I talked about this, because the neighborhoods were getting engaged in gathering so much stuff, we held a summit on ABCD, and we invited people from the community, the neighborhoods, to do little workshops and presentations on things that they had done. And some of it might have been with, like a university or just by themselves, that they wanted to share with other neighborhoods. And we had like 2 days of presenting projects that they felt they had accomplished. And then the university folks worked with them to capture that in other meaningful ways. So that was one thing that we found was very helpful, is having them share their experience and their process with other people that wanted to work on neighborhood or county initiatives or whatever. And then I know, I'm trying to think, I mean, I could have a longer conversation with you sometime if you want. I'd be happy to do that. I'm sort of blanking on it right now. But we did have like formal evaluators work on some of our stuff by the time I left, 10, 12 years later. They actually put it into a format. It was very helpful. And then they did final interviews and assessments with neighbors to say, do you think this represents what you guys did? And they said, yeah. It's sort of like participatory action research, where the neighbors came up with questions. Our medical and nursing students were the data gatherers, if you will. They went out and assessed families. They came back. They met. They presented it back to the community refined it, and then we would do that cycle all over again. And then the people at the university took that information that the students were bringing back and put it in a format that the neighborhood really liked. So they could just keep getting it. And they really appreciated it. So, I don't know if I answered your question.
I think we have time for one more
One
question.
more question, okay.
So this approach, I like this approach. It mirrors a lot of kind of what we've been doing in positive youth development for decades.
Yeah.
And one of sometimes the unintended consequences of doing this kind of thing is you start identifying these capacity-based approaches to being resilient to the structural deficits within the communities. And that then gets interpreted as, oh, well, they've come up with their own solution to the problem, so now we don't need the investments into the communities to deal with the structural barriers. So you started off talking about in Cathedral City, or the Cathedral neighborhood, there was no supermarket. Well, if through the process you identify that there's been this informal network that has been created, which allows food to get into the community, the challenge can then be, sometimes people will look at that and say, oh, well, now we don't need to address the need because they've adapted to the need. So how do you balance that, championing the assets and the ways in which they've adapted to the needs with still realizing that some of these structural and infrastructural needs exist?
Right, and that goes on forever. I mean, it's always a balancing act, and that's always like the $64,000 question too. It goes on forever and ever. In the neighborhood, the neighbors put so much pressure on the hospital that we need, this is the place where you go to get healthy, but we don't even have a gas station or anything in our neighborhood. So the hospital negotiated with 7-Eleven and took neighbors with them and said, we want you to come into the neighborhood and ask the neighbors, what do you want and what do you not want in a 7-Eleven besides convenience foods and gas? And the neighbors said, we don't want to sell alcohol. We have enough problems with that. But we do want a mini grocery. So 7-Eleven agreed to that, and they came in over time. Well, they like being there. They're making money in that neighborhood, and it's an asset to the neighbors. So that was one of the things. The thing I talked about with the credit union, so people didn't have to go find a way to cross the river. It's sitting down and talking with people. It's an ongoing process. It just never changes. But I think if you have an interested city council or city commission or a leadership group, residents, the more they stay engaged with them, it takes resident action. It's not up to all of us. It's up to the residents to keep putting pressure and be involved. And I know a lot of people don't like planners, but they can hold some really good Strong Town. If you're not on the Strong Town Facebook site, you should be. Strong Towns. How to work with communities and make sure citizens have access, but yet keep that going so it doesn't change in the future. And one of the examples, this is probably a great example, but those of us who do work in underserved areas, we have to code them as medically underserved or health profession shortage areas to get money. Okay, so if you get a doctor, then your score goes up. It says you're no longer underserved. Well, that's crazy because you still need more doctors. So it's that cycle. So eventually people put pressure on HRSA, the Health Resource Services Administration, and said, don't change our score just because we got a doctor. We still need more doctors or PAs or nurse practitioners. It's just sort of a vicious cycle. So it's a real balancing act, but it's on the citizens too, not just on us institutions, those of us in institutions. Keep pressure on. But they have to be engaged, they have to go to city council meetings, they have to go to the community development meetings, the planning departments that put out okay, we're gonna do a new vision for our town, and we wanna get citizen input. You have to go and say, this is what I want. And we need to continue this is working, or this is not working. You just have to do it. So, it's hard. It's very hard. I completely agree. All right, so.
Thank you, Lisa.
I just have a couple notes real quick. And so if you're a community member and if you need parking validation, please see Brandy Langley. Brandy, if you just, and she will have parking paid for you. Also, I would like to thank Brandy Langley and Kyla Cox-Deckard for their help in putting this on together. And also another big thanks to Lisa Hayden for coming in from Michigan and talking to us about ABCD.